It happens so often at this point in time that some days I feel like I'm living in a really bad Monster of the Week TV show. There's the monster or the villain of the moment. The guy who comes out of seemingly nowhere, reaches immense amounts of fame seemingly overnight on TikTok, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Patreon, whatever platform you want to talk about, and they wind up making more money in a year than you and I will see in a lifetime. And everything's going good for them. They have the adoration of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people. They have a massive revenue stream. Opportunities are all over the place. All they have to do is just not screw it up. They have to just keep hitting the record button, keep making the content their fans want, and be a little bit conservative with their money. And if they can put their money into exchange traded funds, max out their RRSP, buy a house, buy a car, there's all kinds of things that they can do with the money. And they can be set potentially for life. If not, they'll have a massive nest egg that they can always rely on. Maybe if they only make enough money to buy a house, then they can live in a house with no mortgage. And if they have to go back and get another job, they don't have to pay a mortgage anymore. Maybe they can even spin off the career into something more normal, like become a talk radio show host, work in the entertainment industry, start their own company, maybe mentor and recruit other content creators. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people can go on and do if they don't want to be a dedicated streamer for the rest of their lives. And yet, in almost every case, what winds up happening is these people can't do this seemingly very basic thing. Their egos or their appetites or their personalities lead them to explode in a spectacular fashion. And it's fascinating to watch, and that's kind of where you get the lol cow from, is somebody who was famous, generally speaking, although there's a lot of people who were just never famous and just were famous for being a lol cow to begin with, but you'll have someone and you'll just watch them destroy themselves in the most bizarre and strange ways. And it's fascinating. And you know the old like expression, it's like a train wreck. It's horrific, but it's so interesting you can't look away. But a lot of people thought that Nick Rekeita was different. They thought that he was the combo breaker, as it were. That he was an exception to the rule. That he was going to make it in a way that no one else was going to make it. That he had a lot of advantages that none of the other people did. And that he was going to make it through this in one piece. And it was going to be a big aspirational example to all of us. That it is possible to become rich, to become successful without becoming a complete and total degenerate. Without it going to your head and becoming an egomaniac and destroying all of your interpersonal relationships and ruining your family and getting into legal trouble. And Nick Rekeita really looked like for a long time he was going in that direction. And a lot of people, I think, really looked up to him for that and kind of saw him as a model of what a content creator could be. That a content creator could be a normal, upstanding person. Unfortunately, none of this wound up happening, and we are currently in the middle of one of the most degenerate, bizarre disasters I think I've ever seen. I mean, this makes DSP look like, I can't think of a comparison, something very uninteresting and unimportant, because this whole explosion, this downfall, is fascinating to behold. So let us just take a step back. We're going to go through the history of Nick Rekeita, his rise, his fall, and why it matters, and why a lot of people who normally would just laugh at lol cows and wouldn't really have much sympathy, even if they're horrified by the stuff that he's done, the wasted potential, the fact that this man had basically everything any of us could aspire to, and he just threw it all away for drugs, for sex, for alcohol, for all these just bizarre decisions. It's very depressing, and it makes us feel, if a man with a loving wife, with 5 kids, with a social support structure, who is very involved in his church, who doesn't live in Los Angeles or Seattle or like a party area, who lives in like a small town in Minnesota, if this man can't handle any kind of fame and fortune, what chance do the rest of us have to live a normal life, let alone to achieve anything? And so he was, I think, aspirational to a lot of people. Now, who is Nick Rekeita? So Nick Rekeita is a lawyer from Minnesota. He is, I think, I'm not super familiar with LawTuber, but I think he was one of the founders of it. LawTuber was this thing that came up where, like, overnight, a whole bunch of lawyers just started reacting to trials, commenting on legal affairs. I mean, you see this all the time on TV. You have like Boston Legal and CSI and stuff like that. And then you have true crime documentaries, and you have like the legal analysis show with Judge Judy or Andrew Napolitano or whoever. And so they decided to take this to YouTube. And particularly during the pandemic, courtrooms started to stream a lot of their trials. They started to stream the trials more. A lot of things like body cam footage was becoming available online. Recordings of calls, you could get all kinds of extra stuff from the Freedom of Information Act. And there was this opportunity that hadn't been there before to have LawTuber, to have all these lawyers come on, and you could directly interact with them through streaming. You could get legal advice. You could enjoy a degree of honesty and interaction that you might not have seen. And Nick Rekeita was one of the first people to come up with this. Now, he was a seemingly very humble, mild-mannered, pleasant man from, like I said, small-town Minnesota. He has 5 killed children, a very loving wife. He's extremely involved with his local church. He's a pillar of his community. His kids are homeschooled. Apparently, there's some sort of arrangement where the people who go to his church they kind of made their own. It's not quite a private school, but I think all the kids who are homeschooled from the school have teachers who teach them together. But it just comes across as being this very wholesome thing. You got this man from a small town in the Midwest with his goofy Minnesota accent and kind of his small town folksy country persona on YouTube now and talking about all these big legal things. Nick also had all kinds of other normal nerdy interests that are common, like Warhammer 40k and video games and stuff like that. But people, I think, really latched onto that. They saw him as someone who was very authentic, who was very wholesome, as the kind of person they'd actually like to know in real life. It also, like I said, is very aspirational. It's this guy who kind of reminds you of your dad or your uncle, your older brother or something. If he's able to make it and he's able to kind of break out of his shell and break into the sector or the industry, then maybe you might be able to. So Nick Rekeita is a LawTuber, like I said. So LawTuber is, as I said, a bunch of lawyers who react to court cases, who read documents, who give legal opinions on things. They're basically celebrity lawyers who run their own channels. Some of them also have a law practice that they are engaged in, and they view it as kind of a bit of a promotional thing. But he entered into the fray. Now, Nick Rekeita's political views, I'm not entirely sure how he would define himself. He seemed like just kind of a conservative, I guess you could say. Like maybe like a paleo-conservative or something. Like he lived allegedly a very Christian, wholesome life. That turned out to not be the case, but that's how he portrayed himself. He was known for being a staunch defender of freedom of speech, being against censorship, not liking government overreach. Basically kind of your normal rural conservative type person. Something that was big about him is that he would not refuse to speak to people if they were controversial. So if someone was alt-right or dissident right or involved in IBS or something like that, he would still have them on, he would still talk to them, he would still have a cordial relationship with them. So a lot of people who were into various dissident right figures or internet blood sports figures wound up running into Rekeita. I ran into him personally because I was following PPP, and he went on Rekeita's show to debate Dick Masterson, but he was also involved with Mr. Medicare, Andy Worski, all of these kind of guys, and yet it seemed like he was the adult in the room. That these people were all drug addicts and degenerates, but you have this family man who's just there, and he's just kind of like, oh shucks, it's like, what am I even doing here type of thing. So Rekeita was someone who I found, at least initially, was slowly rising up. Now, the big thing that he got involved with was The voice actor Vic Mignogna, who, from my understanding, is very well known in the voice actor. He's very widely respected. I think his biggest role is as Edward Elric in FMA Brotherhood, but also Broly in the Dragon Ball Z Super movie. He got Me Too'd. He got Me Too'd by Monica Rial and Jamie Marshy, who are both very detestable people. It just kind of got piled on, and it very quickly became something of a culture war issue. Because Vic Mignogna is a very devout Christian. He's put out, I believe, a number of gospel albums. He's said things that are considered homophobic or stuff like that. And so a lot of people who don't like people who have that lifestyle or those views decided to dogpile him, and we started to get all these accusations and stuff like that. And the evidence was complete nonsense. It was he hugged some fans at conventions. I think some of them might have been underage or something like that. And he did a joke where he ate a jelly bean. And that was that was what it is. So he got Me Too, he got fired, his life basically got ruined, and Nick Rekeita saw an opportunity. He was going to be the defender of free speech. He was going to become the leader of the culture war. So he came up with Vic Kicks Back, because they kicked Vic, so it's Vic Kicks Back. And he sold, if you watch these streams, he just sold it up so much. He said, it's a sure thing. This whole thing is nonsense. Vic has this great case for defamation. He's going to take Funimation to the cleaners. It's going to be a victory for freedom of speech, for Christians. It's going to be this precedent that's set that you can't be abused that way just because you disagree or the people who run your company don't like your political views. And Vic Kicks Back raised an astronomical amount. It was like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I admit I donated to it. I wanted to support Vic Mignogna. I thought what happened to him was completely unfair and nonsensical, and I wanted to support a dude who was being hit while he was down for seemingly no legitimate reason in my mind. So all these people donated, and what wound up happening is he hired a overpriced, sleazy, incompetent lawyer named Ty Beard, and there was all kinds of cringe involved with it. They do streams together, like it's. I don't really have time to go into the whole thing, but he was just completely incompetent. The whole thing turned into an unmitigated disaster. Vic lost the trial. He initially only had to pay $100,000 in legal fees to the people he was suing, but Ty Beard and Nick Rekeita were like, "No, you gotta appeal this." And then the judge upped it to $300,000 in legal fees, and Vic was left with massive legal debt and a ruined career. And I mean, he probably could have just taken like the hit and apologized and tried to do something about the accusations against him, even if it was unjustified. But Nick kind of used him as a tool to gain a lot of power and clout in the sector, particularly among a lot of anime fans. A lot of kind of, like I said, he kind of was at this nexus of LawTube, of like IBS, the dissident right, of people who like video games and anime and stuff like that. He just had a very broad appeal. Now, what really led to Nick Rekeita becoming the titan that he eventually did was the Kyle Rittenhouse and the Amber Heard trials. Now, he covered them. He had a whole bunch of people on. A lot of LawTube, from my understanding, was made from these trials. People who now have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, Nick would have on to give their take, and they just basically cover these trials every day. Nick would have hundreds of thousands of viewers. He would make hundreds of thousands of dollars per stream, millions of dollars, I think, a week. I'm not sure the exact amount, but he was making bank. He was making like stupid amounts of money off of this. And the Rittenhouse trial and the Amber Heard trial, and then all this other stuff was just happening and everything was going good. So a lot of people were thinking, you know what, Nick, maybe it's time to branch out. Maybe you could be like you could go to CNN or MSNBC or Fox or something, and you could become one of those legal analysts that they have on, like the talking heads. They could have you on, you have a good persona for it, you have a good backstory. Why don't you just do that, Nick? That could be you. You could be the next Andrew Napolitano or whoever. I don't watch cable news, so I don't know who they have on these days. But that could be you. Or you could, I don't know, do something else, start a network, or you could just keep watching trials and commenting on them and making stupid amounts of money, and having your kids be set for life. I mean, once again, this man has 5 kids. It's not like he's some random loser guy who has his millions of dollars and nothing to show for it. He has a legacy. He has 5 children. From everything I've heard, they're wonderful children. They're well-adjusted children. And part of this was a lot of people like me were like, look, he's actually raised, he actually had kids. He's an all-American Christian guy. He had 5 kids. He did his job in the demographic war. They're being homeschooled. They're being raised with Christian values. Whether you like evangelicals or not, I don't really care. Most people would see this as a net, at least in my political side of the spectrum, would see this as being a really good thing for society. But it was hoped that this would give him a purpose, that he would want to keep this money because he could pay all of his kids' way through school. Who knows? Maybe he could buy them all, give a down payment on all of them for their houses. He could get his kids all set up. And that's something that most of us can only dream of. Whatever you think about his wife, Kayla, she loved him. I think she still loves him, but they were very affectionate with each other. I mean, the fact that they had 5 kids kind of indicates that they were very affectionate with each other. But Nick had something to live for. He had something to not be a degenerate for. And I don't think his job wound up taking up that much time. So he got to live at home most of the time, do his fun show, and spend time with his kids and wife who love him. And you'd think that this is the dream. This is like, how can you screw this up? But he did. Now, the meme at the heart of this whole thing is the Sonichu medallion. So he received the Sonichu medallion in the mail. The person who sent it listed the return address as being his address and the address that it was sent from as being his address, and he had to pay to receive it. And the Sonichu medallion came with a burned piece of paper that said a new host has been chosen. So he took out the Sonichu medallion and he put it on. And to my understanding, that was around where everything just started to really go off the rails. Now, a lot of people say it's a curse or something like that. I don't really believe that, but I think it is funny. It is funny how the curse seemingly transferred to Ethan Ralph and then to Nick Rekeita. So, things started to slowly but surely get a little bit weird on stream. Nick was drinking a lot. He always liked his whiskey, but he was basically drinking constantly. His physical condition deteriorated over time. He became incredibly gaunt, sallow eyes, unhealthy skin tone. He lost a disturbing amount of weight. He started to look like a corpse. Like I said, he drank constantly. He would often get drunk on stream. I think they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on artwork, at charity auctions to show as a form of conspicuous consumption. They were going to buy a robot dog at some point in time. They were blowing all this money, and then more and more his personal life started to come out. I think the thing that I recall that really started it was his wife was on and she gave this story about how she went to get a massage and the dude was groping her boobs, and she's like, yeah, but I went back a couple more times and it was just really awkward. But more and more stuff came out. There was like some photo Nick put out on his Discord of like with a bottle up his ass or something. And this is when the Baldo comes out. Now the Baldo has basically become his nickname. Jim called the stream Breaking Baldo. There's the joke, if the Baldo don't fit, you must acquit. So the Baldo is a dildo that you strap to your testicles and you have sex using your testicles, presumably to have a ballgasm. Apparently that is a thing that they claim. And I think it's sometimes used if because the guy is so drunk and high, they can't get hard and perform, so they put on the Baldo. And so most of us had never heard of this thing before. I thought it was a joke for the longest period of time, but apparently it's a real thing. Apparently he had one. Apparently his co-host had one. There's some stories that he kept the used Baldo on like his bedside table or something. So that came out. It came out that his wife and him were going to an infamous club called Hedonism in the Caribbean. There was all these rumors that they were swingers. All kinds of just weird stuff started to go down really quick. There's also stuff like there was local sex clubs people spotted him at. All kinds of really weird stuff. And his physical condition continued to deteriorate, and he continued to get weirder and weirder and more unhinged on stream. There was a particular one in where he went on for like 3 hours, and he was obviously just completely blown out of his mind. And he just said all kinds of edgy, incoherent stuff. And I mean, it's pretty funny, but once again, this dude is a father of 5. This man is a father of 5, and the kids are having to like watch this. Like, do you think the kids like have to watch his show? Like, do you think they turn on their show? I mean, they don't go to a public school, thank God, but like, how must it feel to like have video footage of your father getting high out of his mind and just rambling on online? And I mean, if this was like performance art or avant-garde or something like that, that would be one thing. But it very clearly isn't. It's very clear that he's an alcoholic and he was just kind of doing all this stuff. So it eventually became clear that, his wife and him were swingers. Now, before we get into that, there was another Odysee that helped to the destruction of Nick Rekeita. So there was another YouTuber named Steve Quest, and Nick decided to call him a pedophile with no evidence. And he said, if you don't like me calling you a pedophile, then sue me. So Steve Quest did sue him for defamation. And Nick decided to fight it all the way. Really, all I think Steve Quest wanted initially was just an apology. They just like to say, no, he's not a pedo. I shouldn't have said that. But it just went on and on and on. It's cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the judge in that is Jennifer Fisher, who is a judge in his local town in Minnesota. And he got creamed. He lost that. He's doing like appeal after appeal to try to get the defamation suit reversed. I think he has to pay legal fees for Steve Quest. He refuses to admit he's wrong. And in one of his, he started to attack Jennifer Fisher on his high drunken rants, where he had this, it was really disgusting. Like, I'd never even heard this term before. He was talking about, like, her dripping with pussy alcohol or something, like squeezing pussy alcohol out onto him and just soaking the floor. Like, I had never even heard of it before. It was just really gross. I'm just like, dude, you're saying this about the judge who's in charge of your case. Like, that's not a smart idea. And he just said that she was stupid, a dumb bitch. We had some stuff where he said she's like every woman, she doesn't know what she's doing, and just kind of like edgy stuff like that. And he did this on a live stream multiple times, and he thought that this was a good idea. Now, another couple moved in. There's apparently, I don't know who any of these people are. There's a guy named Aaron and April. Aaron runs some show called Steel Toe Morning Show that I'd never heard of again. And there is this weird wife swap. Now, Aaron has gone on Kino Casino and burned everything down and told his side of the story, which we'll get into in a second. But basically, it was somewhere between swinging and wife swapping. Because Aaron claims like he fell deeply in love with Kayla, and they had an emotional connection as well as a sexual one, and they would make snow angels together, and they just loved each other so much. And then Nick was just having sex with his wife April, and apparently they would all like sleep in the same bed and just fuck each other. And there was copious amounts of drugs, obviously, mostly cocaine, but also ketamine and Molly and stuff like that. And everybody was just high and drunk 24/7. Um, is the story that Aaron told us. Now, if you go through what Aaron said, I don't believe a lot of what he said. I think it's basically true, but I think what he's trying to do, and I think it's probably a smart thing, is he's coming out and pleading guilty to the lesser crime so he can get away with the bigger crime. He's saying, I was a degenerate, I let my wife get cocked, I let my wife do all this other stuff. But like I was a degenerate and stuff like that, but I didn't do this other stuff. I didn't do these other things. I didn't do that many drugs. I didn't give drugs to the kids. I didn't do all this stuff. So you have all these stories where he shits on himself, but he comes out as the hero in basically every story. So I think he's definitely there's some unreliable narrator tropes here. But that's basically what it was. So he had all these insane stories about the swinging lifestyle, about all the crazy stuff that was going on in that house. And eventually what wound up happening is he claims that he left because he couldn't take it anymore. Because he had a crisis of conscience. And it was so bad. And he was the only decent man there. I don't know. The whole thing was also just him white knighting for Kayla and saying how she was like the love of his life, and it was incredibly cringy. The entire thing. So apparently, during this whole thing, what were the kids doing? How did the kids feel about the fact that there's a couple living over and fucking their parents on a daily basis and snorting copious amounts of cocaine and Molly and that they're high 24/7. We don't know exactly what happened with the kids, but apparently the kids were starting to go hungry because Nick and his wife were just stoned out of their mind 24/7 and they weren't feeding them. Aaron claims that he was feeding them SpaghettiOs and takeout. Um, Now, a lot of people have wondered, like, what even is this? Is this real? Now, some people have suggested, and I'm sure people get angry at me for entertaining this. The oldest kid is 16. Couldn't they get some food for the other kids? And I mean, I guess the thing is, I think they live out a ways from other stuff, and it's not really like if there's no food in the house, there's no food in the house. Um, it doesn't matter if the kid can cook or not; they can't do it. Also, I don't think them getting takeout is really the worst thing. You can get reasonably healthy takeout or takeout that's basically normal food. So I don't really think that that is a big thing. And then so anyway, so the kids were apparently like not eating or not eating properly. Aaron, the saint that he was, decided to feed them SpaghettiOs and stuff like that and get them takeout. Also, the kids apparently laundry was not being done. The whole house was completely filthy and just caked in shit. None of the kids' clothes were getting cleaned, and they started to smell. They started to smell really bad after apparently 3 or 4 days. Now, I find this. I don't like. I don't want to be that guy, but I often will wear a pair of jeans like 3 or 4 times, and they doesn't get that smelly. I don't know. It must have been longer than that, or they must have been doing a lot of exercising or something. I don't know. It just that seems weird if they got like noticeably that stinky. Also, like I get maybe for the younger kids, but do the older kids need like Nick to bathe them? They can't take a shower themselves at that age. I don't know. The whole thing is just really weird, and I do to a certain extent get why people are skeptical about some details of this. A lot of this is frankly speculation. We'll get into that in a second. The most detail we've gotten is from Aaron, and I don't think he's a reliable narrator. Don't make this sound like don't take this as me defending Nick, because I'm not. I'm just saying that we don't know the exactness of this. There's a lot of speculation going on. So all this madness was going on, and the kids apparently talked to their teacher and said they were hungry, and the teacher noticed that they were smelling and looked upset and dirty and stuff like that, and they were going, this seems very unusual, and I'm not sure the exact mechanics of it, if they just inferred this, if she asked them if they were being fed, if the kids were worried and actively sought her out, but basically she got the idea that something was going down. And in Minnesota, apparently, if you're a teacher, you're a mandatory reporter. You have to report this to the police. Likewise, I think 4 people independently came to the pastor of his church and said, look, something's going down here. I don't know if it's drugs. I don't know if but those kids are in danger. And so he reported. There was also a live stream numerous live streams where Nick got high out of his mind. In particular, there was a live stream where he appeared to be doing coke. He left for a period of time, and he came back super hyper, and they claimed there was white powder on his nose. I couldn't tell from the picture. Maybe my eyesight's just not good enough. It looked kind of blurry to me, but that was apparently used as evidence, which I find a little weird, but I think the grand total of the whole, his behavior, his decline, the insane stuff he was doing, the fact that his kids were like, we aren't being fed, the fact that numerous people independently were like, yeah, this whole thing is fucked. That all this stuff happened, I think it was justified that the police went in. So the police went in and they found he had 26 grams of cocaine, which I don't really know how much cocaine that is. Apparently that's a lot. That's a lot I think that's the highest level of drug possession, punishable up to 20 years in jail, I believe, for possessing that amount of cocaine. Also, they found all kinds of loaded guns. Now, I support the Second Amendment. I support people's rights to own weapons. The argument that people have had, and I think this is a fair one, is it might not be a good idea to leave loaded guns not locked up in a house full of kids, particularly young kids as young as 6. And I think that is a fair point. Apparently there were shell casings all over the floor in the bedroom or something like that. There's a bunch of loaded guns. Now, I get that you want to keep the gun loaded, so if somebody breaks into your home, it's readily available, but I don't think it should just be lying under your bed or lying on somewhere. Kids are dumb. You have to be cognizant of that. I'm not questioning his right to own the gun. I'm not questioning his right to use it in self-defense, but I do get, if you have kids, you have to be careful that they aren't doing stupid shit with the guns, because that happens. Adults kill themselves or kill each other all the time doing stupid shit with guns. Obviously, kids are as well. But from what Aaron tells us, yeah, they were just doing drugs everywhere. They were doing drugs on the counter. Nick had a bullet that he would carry around with him. Apparently, in a couple cases, the bullet fell out of his pocket right next to the 6-year-old kid. Aaron claimed that that Nick dropped a bunch of coke next to his 3-year-old or something like that. There was MD, there was Molly gummies and stuff, and the gummies were kept in plastic bags, that looked like snack. Basically, the bags you put grapes or carrots or apple slices in, and those had these gummies, and they were within reach of kids, and the cocaine was in reach of kids, and all this booze was everywhere, and it's I think to me that is the thing. While all the degeneracy is disgusting and horrific, and the fact that the kids were involved with it, I think, and I hate to, I get why people say, oh, it's about the kids, it's pearl clutching and stuff like that, but kids shouldn't be exposed to that kind of stuff. is it really good for them to be around people who are high 24/7? I mean, my understanding is cocaine. I don't really know that much about drugs, to be honest, but isn't cocaine often caught with like bad stuff that can seriously make you ill? I mean, it's bad enough for an adult. Like, do you really want like all these trace amounts of cocaine getting into your kid's food and whatever other impurities there are? And the kids could have found the gummies and taken those, or they could have like just been like, "Oh, is this sugar or flour or something?" and like eaten the cocaine. I don't know. It does sound like the kind of environment that kids really should not be in. It sounds extremely dangerous and extremely irresponsible. Now you are getting the Nick Defense Squad, whose argument is that the warrant for some, I don't know, it's like the reasons they've come up with are insane. It's like, well, they pretend that the only reason the police went there was because of that they watched the live stream of him allegedly snorting coke. And they ignore like his kids complaining and the people at his church complaining and stuff like that. They pretend that the stuff. Some people have the like. It was cool that Nick Rekeita was like a swinger who had a bunch of like guns, and also it's illegal to have loaded guns when you're high out of your mind. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. Is it's not necessarily that he had guns; it's that he was completely flying on drugs 24/7 and had loaded guns within reach. So, I mean, once again, is that really like, do you want a guy who's drunk and high who has loaded guns near him? I mean, this sounds especially bad. And it would be bad enough if this was just him or him and his wife, but the fact that there's like a bunch of kids who could be victims of this madness. And they're saying like, oh, it's cool that he was a drug addict who was fucking somebody else's wife and had all these guns and stuff like that. He's a victim of the war on drugs. There's even the biggest cope is that because he was like conservative and he like was fighting the local judge and he was fighting Joe Biden, that this whole thing was planted, that it was a conspiracy, and all that kind of thing. And that is the cope. But ultimately, it's sad. Like, this dude, like I said, he had everything. He had a loving wife who clearly, I mean, the fact that they had 5 kids indicates that they had they were pretty affectionate with each other, if you catch my meaning. His kids, everyone's told me, are great, well behaved, well adjusted. He could have paid all their way through university. He could have probably used his connections to get them jobs in the law field or really any field. And, like, isn't that the definition of success? Isn't that the definition of the American dream? Getting wealthy, having a loving wife, having a bunch of beautiful children. And he just threw it all away. He just threw it all away and imploded because he wanted to do cocaine and fuck Steel Toe Morning Show or whatever the fuck his name is, wife. And that to him, for whatever reason, was more important. Ultimately, he cared more about his drugs and his degenerate sex and his baldo than he cared about his children, about his flesh and blood. And it's really sad. Because a lot of the people who get into this don't have that support. They come from like bad backgrounds, like they're on bad terms with their parents. They don't have anybody in their lives. They're depressed, they're lonely, and Nick didn't have those issues. His parents love him. His parents had like a trust fund set up for him. He had a community that he was the pillar of. And despite all these advantages, he just imploded in just this pathetic, disgusting, degenerative fashion. And I don't know what to even really say about it. It's sad, though. It's sad. And like I said, for all the rest of us who don't have these advantages, what hope do we have? What hope do we have of making it? What hope do we have of being successful, of achieving everything if the guy who had everything, the guy who's smart, articulate, isn't able to make it? So how are you or I going to do it? And that's That's kind of the black pilling aspect of this. That's the depressing aspect of this. And I think that's what really kind of shook Jim, as it were, and made him upset and made him basically like almost in tears by the end of his live stream. But that is the tale of Nick Rekeita, and why it matters and why people are paying attention to it. So I'm not really sure if there's a particular lesson that we can take away from this, other than just to say that it's rough, man. It's really, really rough, and you have to be so careful. You have to be so careful to not let it go to your head and to not go crazy and to not get involved with all this degenerate shit. I don't even really know what to say, but hopefully he can get his life together. Maybe like they won't take his kids away. I can't really blame them if they do. Like, once again, do you really want like 5 kids to be in a household with adults who are fucking each other, like have another couple over and are drunk and high and playing around with loaded guns? Like, is that what you really want? I don't know. But that is the tale of Nick Rekeita. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you learned something. I don't know if there's really a lesson to be taken away from this, but I did my best. God bless everybody. So goes us all, I guess the saying is.